7 years ago, on the day of calamity, a horrific disaster known as the dungeon break occurred. Because of this disaster, many people suffered. In addition to losing their possessions, they also lost their loved ones. Thousands of monsters snatched away the peace of the world. The parents of our main character also died because of the monster invasion. It was the day he lost everything in a short time. With tears streaming down his face, he vowed to himself that he would become a hunter who would tear apart the monsters and annihilate them. 7 years later, in the present, our main character, Sung-yoon, is seen sitting on a bench in the Disaster Memorial Park. Behind him, a woman and her child are seen talking. Sung-yoon sits on the bench with his head bowed. He is lamenting his fate, having just been expelled from the Hunter Training Center. He recalls the moment the trainer expelled him. The trainer said he didn't need to come to the training center anymore. At that moment, he was shocked and didn't understand why the trainer suddenly said that. He tried asking the trainer why he was expelled from the place. Had he done something wrong? The trainer calmly tried to explain to Sung-yoon that those who awakened were given several months to complete their training at the exclusive training hall. And usually, they debut as hunters. The trainer continued his explanation, saying that Sung-yoon had surpassed that period for 7 years. The trainer paused for a moment. Meanwhile, Sung-yoon's gaze was sharp, as if trying to guess what the trainer would say next. The trainer finally revealed the reason why Sung-yoon was expelled from the Hunter Training Center. According to him, Sung-yoon had no talent at all. His talent was worse than garbage. If Sung-yoon were allowed to stay at the training center continuously, the training center's reputation would also become garbage. Sung-yoon's gaze appeared sad upon hearing the trainer's words that belittled him. Sung-yoon's friends at the training center often talked about him and considered him foolish because his status did not improve despite training for 7 years. Sung-yoon looked upset. He cursed his unlucky fate. Besides unlocking unique characters and skills, his status did not increase at all during training. As he lamented his unfortunate fate, Sung-yoon heard the woman's voice behind him. The woman asked her child how his father died. The small child looked excited and said he knew and remembered. When the monsters attacked, his father died trying to save people until the end. The small child said loudly to his mother. The mother smiled and listened to her child's answer. She then asked again, "What should you do now?" The child firmly said that he must be strong and not give up. Sung-yoon heard the conversation between the mother and child. He suddenly felt motivated. He then stood up and approached the mother and child who were hugging. They looked surprised at Sung-yoon's arrival. Sung-yoon then bowed in front of the woman and her child and thanked them. Meanwhile, the woman asked who he was. Sung-yoon did not answer. Instead, he hurriedly left the woman who looked bewildered by his behavior. With renewed spirit, Sung-yoon ran. He thought that the child's words were true. How could he hold on for the past 7 years? "I can't stop here. I must not give up," Sung-yoon said in his heart as he continued to run. He kept running along the quiet city streets. His spirit rekindled by the child's words, and he felt it was not the time to give up. Some time later, under the pouring rain, Sung-yoon arrived in front of the trainer's house. He knocked on the door and waited for the trainer to open it. Not long after, the door opened. Sung-yoon stood upright, facing the trainer. With a deep sigh, the trainer asked Sung-yoon to return home. He could not fulfill Sung-yoon's desire to rejoin the training center. Sung-yoon still hoped that the trainer, who was also the director of the training center, would give him one more chance to take the hunter exam. He felt he couldn't give up just yet. The trainer looked angry, hearing Sung-yoon's words, which seemed not to understand why he was expelled from the training center. Sung-yoon looked at the trainer's face, which began to turn red with anger. But he didn't care. For him, he must be allowed to take the hunter exam again. The trainer then spoke harshly. "Did you come here because the money you spent went to waste? Fine, in that case, I'll refund half of the membership fee." Sung-yoon responded loudly to the trainer's words. He said it wasn't about the money. Suddenly, the trainer punched Sung-yoon hard in the face, causing his body to stagger. Sung-yoon fell among the piles of garbage cans in front of the trainer's house. The trainer looked at Sung-yoon, who was still silent, with a cynical gaze. He considered Sung-yoon worthless. Sung-yoon was just a failure without any talent. Sung-yoon only bowed weakly, hearing the trainer's insulting words. He didn't know what to say to convince the trainer. While bowing, he muttered in his heart, "If only I had a little talent, maybe I wouldn't end up like this." His tears fell into the puddle in front of him. He regretted his unlucky fate. Suddenly, from the puddle in front of him, a virtual screen appeared, displaying a message that the Tower of Trial praised Sungyun's strong will. Sungyun was, of course, shocked to see the virtual screen's appearance. He wondered where the screen came from. Why did it suddenly appear before him? Then unexpectedly, the puddle around Sungyun's body deepened and pulled his body. He was shocked and couldn't escape the pull. Sungyun then screamed loudly for help. The trainer, disturbed by Sungyun's screams, rushed out and opened his house door. He was very annoyed with Sungyun for daring to disturb his rest. But he didn't find Sungyun around his house door, even though he had heard Sungyun's screams very loudly. The trainer tried to look around but couldn't find Sungyun anywhere. Even around the garbage cans where he had been sitting earlier, he wasn't there. Annoyed, the trainer went back into his house. Meanwhile, Sungyun was being pulled deeper into the puddle. He couldn't fight the pull of the water that dragged him further. The situation made it hard for him to breathe as he had to close his mouth to avoid swallowing water. Finally, Sungyun was pulled into another dimension. He looked at the virtual screen in front of him. The screen displayed that the Tower of Trial had selected all suitable candidates from Earth. Sungyun didn't understand what the virtual screen was saying. Was a second disaster about to happen? The virtual screen displayed another message. It instructed Sungyun to choose the desired difficulty level. Sungyun kept watching the virtual screen. Then the screen displayed another message stating that the reward would be proportional to the chosen difficulty level. Sungyun still didn't understand what was happening. He saw the virtual screen displaying several difficulty level options. Although he still didn't understand what was happening, his instincts told him to take advantage of the opportunity. Then he pressed one of the options. Suddenly, his body was pulled downward more strongly. The pull made him feel pain all over his body. Moments later, the screen announced that Sungyun would enter the first floor. The virtual screen displayed more information related to the challenge Sungyun would undertake. Finally, Sungyun arrived in a vast desert area. He tried to recognize his surroundings. Then the system prepared a weapon for Sungyun. The sword landed and stuck in the desert in front of Sungyun. The virtual screen then informed him that the trial's subject was survival, and the reward for completing the trial would be unlocking a unique trait. Sungyun didn't understand why the reward was only a unique trait. He thought that for 7 years he trained hard at the training center and only unlocked a unique trait. But here, why was a unique trait given as a reward for completing a trial? He thought it was something that didn't make sense. However, the first thing he had to do was take the sword. Sungyun then hurriedly took the sword in front of him. Suddenly, the ground beneath him moved upwards as if something was pushing the ground from within. The strong push of the ground caused Sungyun's body to be pushed forward, nearly making him fall. The virtual screen displayed a message again. This time the system announced that the trial tutorial had begun. Sungyun was surprised. He didn't expect it to start so soon. The virtual screen informed him that the difficulty level he chose was hard. Then immediately, a golem monster emerged from the sand. The golem's body was very hard because it was composed of large desert stones. The golem's eyes glowed, indicating that it was ready to attack Sungyun. Meanwhile, Sungyun looked surprised at the stone monster in front of him. For a moment, he couldn't move and stood still. The system then informed him that Sungyun had to survive for the specified time. His remaining time was 9 minutes and 58 seconds. The golem monster roared loudly, raising its foot to stomp on Sungyun. Quickly, Sungyun ran to avoid the large monster's foot stomp. He ran as fast as he could to avoid being chased by the monster. The virtual screen reappeared in front of Sungyun. And clearly, the screen displayed that the penalty for failing in the trial was death. Sungyun kept running from the chasing golem monster. Meanwhile, although the golem appeared slow, its large size made it seem fast. Sungyun thought it was impossible for him to keep running away for 9 minutes with his current stamina. The system had given him a sword and told him to survive, but he didn't know what to do. He could only keep running from the golem for the time being. At the moment, he had only 2 choices: either he would die trying to escape from the golem, or he would fight the monster. As he ran, he remembered the mockery of his comrades at the training center. They often laughed at him and considered him foolish for not knowing his place. The golem monster chasing him looked like his trainer, who belittled him for having no talent. Sungyun kept running. He gritted his teeth in anger. Was he going to die miserably because of his stupidity? Finally, he slowly began to realize who he was. He had spent 7 years at the Hunter Training Center. When it came to theory, he felt superior to his comrades. He thought of fighting the golem monster. He had to find a way to survive. He thought, a monster like golem would stop moving if he managed to destroy its core. However, the golem's core was usually in a difficult place. He had to think of a way. Sung Yun ran up a hill in front of him. Then he pushed his body strongly with his right leg to avoid the golem chasing him. His body flew through the air. Meanwhile, the golem tried to grab Sung Yun's body, but Sung Yun's movement was so quick. Sung Yun planted his sword in the hill's surface to prevent himself from sliding down. Meanwhile, his legs tried to hold his body from rolling. He was almost at the top of the hill. Meanwhile, the golem monster struggled to climb the steep hill. The golem fell, rolling as it tried to climb up the hill. With its large body, it would be difficult to climb such a steep hill. Sung Yun saw the golem's core point exposed. He had a chance to defeat the monster if he could stab his sword into that point. He then jumped and landed on the golem's body, which had fallen on its back. Sung Yun then quickly moved closer to the golem's core point located on its left chest. He then swung his sword with all his might to slash the golem's weak left chest. A wound opened on the golem's core area from Sung Yun's sword slash but still wasn't enough to kill the monster. Sung Yun quickly moved, swinging his sword again to try to slash the golem's weak body part. But without him realizing it, the golem's right hand had already moved to grab him. Sung Yun's body was caught by the golem. He felt pain as the monster tried to crush his body. The golem brought Sung Yun's body closer to its face. It probably intended to devour Sung Yun with its large mouth. Meanwhile, Sung Yun felt weak and helpless. He remembered the insults from his comrades who thought he was foolish. But suddenly, he screamed loudly and threw his sword strongly at the golem's core point. The sword flew quickly and pierced the golem's core point in its left chest. The golem screamed loudly as its body began to disintegrate. After the golem's body shattered, a virtual screen appeared, informing that Sung Yun had successfully destroyed the golem. Sung Yun retrieved his sword. He felt pain in his body after fighting the golem monster. He couldn't believe he had managed to destroy the monster. The virtual screen appeared again, containing congratulations for Sung Yun for clearing the first floor of the Tower of Trial. He laughed joyfully for surviving the monster's attack. Because of his success, he received a reward of unlocking a unique trait. He also received a reward of 1,000 points for clearing the first floor. Additionally, Sung Yun received an extra reward of quick recovery and 500 points. He was shocked to receive the reward and points. Sung Yun stood still, staring at the virtual screen in front of him. He still couldn't believe what he had achieved. He had worked hard for these 7 years, but the result was only ridicule and insults from his comrades. The virtual screen displayed information again that Sung Yun had unlocked a unique trait. He was given the title with the unique trait of necromancy. Sung Yun smiled because it turned out he could also become a hunter like his comrades. But that would only be possible if he survived. Suddenly, he was startled. His eyes saw something strange in front of him. He saw black fog emerging where the golem had died. He wondered, what was that? The virtual screen then displayed a notification that the unique trait of necromancy had been activated and he was given the option to absorb the spirit of the sand golem. Sung Yun still wondered what the system meant. Was that black fog his unique trait? The system still displayed the option for Sung Yun whether he would absorb the sand golem's spirit. But Sung Yun had not yet made his choice. Suddenly, the black fog that had been gathering around the place where the golem died moved towards him. He was shocked as the black fog seemed to charge at his body. It turned out he had chosen to absorb the spirit of the sand golem. This increased his proficiency by 7%. A small red light was seen entering Sung Yun's body. It was the form of the sand golem spirit he had absorbed. He could feel the spirit inside his body. He understood that he could now store the spirit within him. With the spirit inside his body, his status increased. His strength increased threefold, and his health doubled. He felt as if he had gained extra energy, making his body more powerful. Not only that, but he could also increase stats that hadn't improved in the past 7 years. Sung Yun watched the virtual screen in front of him displaying his current status. He laughed happily. He thought that if he returned with the skills he now had, he could also become a hunter like the others. Not long after, a portal appeared in front of him. The system informed him that he could proceed to the waiting room through the portal. He then stepped toward the portal. For him, there was no choice but to follow the system's instructions. After passing through the portal, Sung Yun fell because he felt weak and powerless. His sword slipped from his grip. He fell face first, feeling several painful wounds on his body. He hadn't realized his injuries were worse than he thought. Suddenly, a green light enveloped his body. He felt his body lifted by the light. Slowly, the light faded away from his body. He saw that his wounds had healed. He thought his body might be restored when the trial ended. In front of him was a small bed. He wondered why there was only one bed in such a large place. He then lay down on the bed to rest for a moment and regain his strength. While lying down, he thought about what his next steps should be. Could he escape from the tower? What was the reason this tower had called him? As he was thinking, the virtual screen appeared again and informed him that he could use 5 commands: info, shop, community, storage, and trial. These commands could be activated with specific keywords. Sung-Yoon paid attention to the 5 keywords displayed on the virtual screen to activate specific commands. Although he still didn't understand what was happening to him, Sung-Yoon tried to focus and survive for now. The virtual screen informed him that the next trial on the second floor would start in 23 minutes and 21 seconds. However, according to the system, he couldn't choose a trial yet and had to wait. Sung-Yoon sat on his bed, looking at the information on the virtual screen. He knew there were many trials in the tower. To pass the time, he tried to open the community command. Before long, he was connected to a community with the same difficulty level as his. In the community, there were some conversations from other players. Sung-Yoon finally understood what the community meant. He paid attention to the conversations in the community. He saw there were also people who were dragged into this world. He thought that person didn't seem like a hunter. Suddenly, Admin XXX entered and muted the conversation. Sung-Yoon was surprised. Why was there an admin in the community? Soon, the community admin shared important information for those who managed to clear the tutorial trial. Sung-Yoon watched the virtual screen seriously. He had to focus and remember all the information being shared. Shortly after, information related to the tower where Sung-Yoon was appeared. Sung-Yoon stared intently at the virtual screen, wanting to remember and understand what was written on it. He could only get points from trials. In other words, he had to do everything he could to survive in the tower. The fact was, he wouldn't be able to get water without points. So, to get points, he had to enter trials and clear the trial floors. After sharing that information, the admin left, and the community chat was opened again. Sung-Yoon remained silent for a moment after seeing the information shared by the community admin. He thought he could become a hunter if he returned. But with just that sword, he wouldn't be able to do much. He remembered the shop command and activated it. Moments later, he obtained a shield from the shop. He then used the shield and sword to practice and improve his combat skills. He remembered that everyone who entered the tower would lose all their stats. However, it should be easier to learn skills they had previously mastered. Because of this, he couldn't forget that he was at the same starting line as those who had entered the tower earlier. He had to train hard to catch up with those who had entered the tower before him. Sung-Yoon lay exhausted on the floor after training for a while. Suddenly, he felt something envelop his body. He felt his body become light and energized again. He then got up and moved his hands. Because of the recovery effect in the waiting room, he could train easily. He planned to keep training for the next trial. After some time in the trial tower, Sung-Yoon felt hungry. He didn't know what to do. He tried to open the inventory on the virtual screen. There he saw some items that could be purchased and used to help him in combat and survive in the trial tower. He only had 40 points left after buying some items. If he didn't get additional rewards, he couldn't dream of getting a shield. Time passed quickly. The system informed him that the second floor trial would start in 17 minutes and 17 seconds. Sung-Yoon was still looking at the virtual screen. He opened several commands on the screen to get information from the system. He tried to stay calm facing the second floor trial. But he wondered if he could survive again. He tried to gather his resolve and determination. He believed he could survive. Finally, the time for the second trial began. Sung-Yoon chose to take the second floor trial. He then entered the portal that had opened in front of him to take on the second floor trial. Moments later, he arrived at the second trial with a difficulty level of hard. He looked around, trying to recognize his surroundings. He thought the second trial was a forest. The system then informed him through the virtual screen that the task for the second floor trial was to defeat the orc chieftain within a limited time. Sung-Yoon continued walking through the forest until he reached the edge of a cliff. He saw below the cliff a settlement with several tents. He noticed the orc tribe's camp below the cliff. The system commanded him to go to the place full of orcs and defeat their chieftain. With full confidence, Sung-Yoon moved down the cliff towards the orc camp. In front of the entrance gate of the orc camp, 2 large-bodied orcs were standing guard. Sung Yun was seen hiding across from the entrance to the orc camp. He sneaked through the tall grass in front of the camp. He thought, usually in a dungeon, if there are guards among the orc tribe, then there are also hunters. It's actually quite difficult to fight a single orc hunter, let alone so many orcs there. To defeat all the orcs, at least an E-rank hunter party is needed. This is to ensure that they don't get killed. Sun Jiun's eyes were still focused on observing the orc camp. He was still trying to think of a proper way to fight the orcs. He thought about retreating first and devising a plan to fight the orcs. After thinking for a moment, he smiled and said to himself that he had a way to deal with the orcs. He then made a torch from firewood in the forest and opened a virtual screen to display the system. Who knows what strategy he would use? Then the torch he was holding was put into the virtual screen. And the torch that was inserted into the system's virtual screen appeared instantly in the virtual screen. He smiled because he felt the first step of his plan to fight the orcs had succeeded. Meanwhile, on the other side, the orcs were seen gathering around the camp. Even though they looked like lazy pigs, the orcs had considerable intelligence. Sung Yun sneaked and hid behind a large tree. He knew that usually, orc hunters go hunting in the morning and return at sunset. So he had plenty of time to deal with the orcs. He thought the only way to complete the trial of fighting the orcs was by using fire. He still didn't move to attack the orcs. Instead, he continued to watch and wait for the right time. The two guards at the entrance to the orc camp were seen talking. Based on the lessons he remembered from the training center, orc guards usually do not always stand guard in front. At certain times they usually enter the camp to eat or rest. When the orc camp guards left the gate, Sung Yun quickly retrieved the torch hidden in the system and threw it into the middle of the orc camp. Immediately, a large blaze of fire erupted in the middle of the orc camp. The orcs panicked and ran around trying to put out the rapidly growing fire. Sung Yun thought, if he could close off the orc camp and keep them busy with the fire, he wouldn't have to worry about facing the orc hunters returning from their hunt. But before that, he had to deal with two orc workers first. Sung Yun observed several orc workers going back and forth fetching water to extinguish the fire burning their camp. He then moved closer to an orc fetching water from the river. However, the orc sensed his presence. Before the orc could turn and attack him, Sung Yun quickly stabbed his sword into the orc's back. As he managed to defeat the orc, the system activated the necromancer's unique trait. Without waiting long, he then absorbed the spirit that emerged from the dead orc. The effect was that his proficiency level increased by 9%. But unbeknownst to him, a guard orc was already behind Sung Yun with an angry gaze. The guard orc immediately struck Sung Yun with its weapon, but Sung Yun managed to block the strong blow with his shield. He then turned around and slashed his sword at the orc. The guard orc was defeated by Sung Yun. He then absorbed the orc's spirit, and the system notified him that the fast recovery skill had been revitalized. Besides being able to absorb his enemy's spirit, defeating enemies could also increase Sun Jian's strength and endurance. After defeating the guard orc, he then walked towards the burning orc camp. Seeing Sun Jian's arrival, the orcs prepared their weapons to attack. Sung Yun stared sharply at the group of orcs in front of him. He saw that there were 5 old clan leaders among the orcs. He was determined to defeat the orc leaders. However, he also had to be cautious of the dangerous guard orcs. He then immediately charged at the worker orcs and slaughtered them one by one. Because he had previously absorbed the spirit of the guard orc, facing the worker orcs was not a problem for him. Sung Yun watched all the orcs moving to attack him. He couldn't let his guard down because they could strike him with their large axes. Luckily, he had a strong shield that he could use to block each blow from the orcs' axes. The guard orc repeatedly attacked Sung Yun but was easily dodged. Sung Yun saw that the guard orc was far from the orc leaders. He thought, if he could defeat the guard orc, it would be easier to face the orc leaders. Sung Yun saw an opportunity to counterattack the guard orc. He shouted while swinging his sword to stab the orc. His weapon successfully pierced the guard orc's body. The orc's body fell to the ground. Once again, Sung Yun managed to defeat a guard orc. He then moved closer to the orc clan leader. Seeing Sung Yun coming to attack, the orc clan leader quickly used a fire skill from his staff. Sung Yun was surprised as he was suddenly attacked by a large burst of fire from the orc clan leader. Quickly, he shielded his body from the fire attack using his shield. The fire blast had a powerful push. Sung Yun struggled to resist the force of the attack to avoid being thrown back. The orc clan leader grew angrier seeing his attack being blocked by Sung Yun. He growled, showing his sharp teeth. Meanwhile, because he managed to withstand the fire attack from the orc clan leader, the system notified him that the fire-resistant achievement had been unlocked. Sung Yun stared sharply at the Orc clan leader. He was eager to defeat him. And that's the end of the first part of the comic series titled Boundless Necromancer. Stay tuned for the next, more exciting part. Thank you for watching.